spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesty above the fruited plain.
Morning. It is 9 o'clock. We're going to start the Board of Commissioners meeting. Let me note that for the public, there's a copy of the Open Meetings Act located on the north wall of the legislative chambers. Also, there is an automatic external defibrillator available in the back of the room in case for some reason that is needed. Also, I ask that you would please silence your cell phones or all electronic devices, or put them, turn them off or put them on mute. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. With that, we will call the Douglas County Board of Equalization to meeting. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Morganson. Commissioner Boyle is absent. Commissioner Kavanaugh is absent. Commissioner Duda.
Here.
Commissioner Kraft is absent. Commissioner Morgan.
Here.
And Mr. Chair.
Here. Item A is approval of the minutes of the Board of Equalization meeting held Tuesday, March 13th, 2018. Item B, call for a meeting and set Tuesday, March 27th, 2018 as the date for a hearing on certified assessment corrections. What's the will of the board?
Move the approval of items A and B. Second.
Motion by Commissioner Duda, second by Commissioner Morgan. Please vote.
You guys are starting to turn us to 9.
Motion passes, all present voting yes.
Item C is citizens' comments. Are there any citizens that wish to comment on Board of Equalization related items that are not officially listed on the Board of Equalization agenda? Are there any citizens' comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to resolutions and item D, approving applications for tax exemptions on motor vehicles recommended for approval by the county treasurer.
I would move the approval of resolution B and adjournment if there is no need for an executive.
There is none. There is a motion by Commissioner Duda, seconded by Commissioner Boyle. Please vote.
Last commissioner here.
Sorry, Mark. Commissioner Morgan. All right, Commissioner Kraft and Commissioner Boyle joined us. Motion passes, all present voting yes.
We'll now call to order the Board of Commissioners meeting. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Morganson. Commissioner Boyle. Here. Commissioner Kavanaugh is absent. Commissioner Duda.
Here.
Commissioner Kraft. Here. Commissioner Morgan. Here. Mr. Chair.
Here. Item 1, minutes and claims. Item A is approval of the minutes of the Board of Commissioners meeting held Tuesday, March 13th, 2018. Item B, approval of claims submitted for payment processed through Tuesday, March 20th, 2018.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Borgeson, seconded by Commissioner Morgan. Please vote.
Motion passes, all present voting yes.
Item 2 is the consent agenda. There are 6 items listed on the consent agenda. What's the will of the board?
Second.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Borgeson, seconded by Commissioner Kraft. See no discussion, please vote.
Commissioner Boyle, how are you voting? Vote yes. Okay. No, you're fine. Motion passes, all present voting yes.
Item 4 is citizens' comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to comment on Board of Commissioners related items that are not officially listed on the Board of Commissioners agenda. Are there any citizens' comments at this time? Mr. Clerk.
Dan Esch, Douglas County Clerk. I actually sent an email to Commissioner Morgan and Commissioner Rogers ahead of time. Today, March 20th, is my cousin Rob Morden's birthday, and since I become clerk, I don't think Rob has missed a live meeting of our county board meeting, so I wanted to, he's a constituent of Commissioner Morgan's, and I just thought I wish him happy birthday. So Rob, happy birthday.
On the first day of spring.
Yep.
My son's birthday. And
Oh, wow.
happy birthday on the first day of spring is cool.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
That's really nice, Dan, for you to do that, and for him to watch us sometimes it's hard for me to. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Item 5 is presentation. Item A, the future of the Omaha Public Library facilities. We're joined today by Laura Marlane, who's the Executive Director of the Omaha Public Library, and Ms. Carol Wayne, who's the President of the Library Board. Thank you all.
Good morning, everyone. We wanted to come because last month the Omaha Public Library trustees passed the Master Facilities Plan, which gives a scope and look at what we think the library system should look like for the next 20 years and shape up to be. And we wanted to get the opportunity to present to you so that you had so that you could ask us any questions. And also because I realized we've been really remiss in not bringing our Executive Director Laura Marlane before you guys since she was hired. It's been 2 years ago, so please just ignore us in our timing. And so in front of you, we put together a packet that has our updated Library Master Facilities Plan, as well as some results from the consultant study that we had done to look at the library, and they had done and applied best practices for libraries across the nation and the standards to our system to take a look at it and made their recommendations. We went and then held various public hearing sessions for the public, and as well as online surveys and in-person paper surveys so that people could give us their input on what they thought was important for the library system and how they wanted to see services improved and changed in the coming years, and what they thought technology needed to be upgraded. We heard that a lot. And then we took all of that, and it was statistically significant, the people who participated, and we boiled all of that down into priorities that we then ratified last month. Laura?
Yes, the survey, we received so many responses, it was very impressive. We have a 95% accuracy rate because of the number of responses we received, with a 2% plus minus. And, excuse me, the information we received from that is going to help us redirect our services over the coming years to focus more on exactly what our patrons want to see in their library system.
And so number one on the Master Facilities Plan priority is the building of a Southwest Library branch, ideally in the 168th to 200th Street L to Q, Center to Q Street corridor. That has been identified as the prime area for the next building of a library branch. Obviously, as you know, Millard, which is at 132nd south of Center, is our busiest branch, 350,000 people or visits a year for a facility that was meant to do 70 to 80,000. And so it is over capacity. So we have started looking at land acquisition and our scouting sites and trying to start putting it together for how we're going to build that next library. All of the libraries, as we start looking at the future, we've got to do some major technology framework because technology seems to be a driving force of what the next generation of libraries appear to need. And so that is going to be part of our look at how we do the next library. So we have identified in the next 20 years that there will probably be 5 libraries that we will have to address in our system. Southwest Library, the building of one. The second thing that is going to happen, according to our Master Facilities Plan, which again, depending on market forces and how things work out, could change a little bit, is the relocation of a main library branch out of downtown into this midtown part of the city between 72nd and 90th Street. We heard overwhelmingly from the public that they wanted a library that was easier access, easier parking, and more space for meetings and possibly even an auditorium type of space, and then we would move a smaller branch the size of Millard downtown, and then we would then address Willa Cather, which is near 42nd and Center, 40th and Center, and then from there we would also have to look at Elkhorn, which is already over utilized and too small of a space, and then long term we would have to address Saddlebrook at 159th and Fort. Can we answer any questions for you?
We can. We have 2 right now. Commissioner Cavanaugh.
Hi, I'm sorry, I just got here. I didn't get the materials that you handed out. If there's an extra one, I'd like to see that. I'm an avid library user, and I think you folks do a great job. I'm really proud of our library system and what we have built over the years. So let me just ask you a couple of things, and I apologize in advance if you've gone over these before, but the W. Dale Clark downtown, is it your intention to close that main library and relocate it?
Our hope is that we are going to rebuild a new library on that site.
Okay. Because that contains, and I've done a considerable amount of like historical research about Omaha stuff, a great archive of old Omaha records that I don't think exists anyplace else. And I'd be very, very concerned about moving that or losing any of that because it's irreplaceable.
The plan is, if we have a central library, it would house all of our research materials, and it would house them in climate-controlled storage, which is where they really should be to preserve them best.
So the relocation of the central library would be to this 72nd to 90th footprint. So you have the Swanson at 90th and Dodge. What would you do with that, or would you use that location as the central?
We would replace Swanson, the central library would replace Swanson.
I see. But we already own, or the city or the library already owns that site. So would you repurpose that site, or what would you do with it?
We would likely sell it.
Okay.
In the long-term strategy, because Swanson is going to the part where its requirement to make it feasible, there's not enough space to make it a central library, and already some of the systems infrastructure are wearing, and so in order to redo it architecturally, we would be facing probably far more costs than we could afford.
Okay. So the Benson Library, which is a relatively new facility, would there be any change in that?
We don't have any changes for that library in the next 20 years.
Okay. And the Sorensen, any anticipated change in that?
We don't have any anticipated changes on the horizon. I think we are constantly trying to figure out whether or not there is another space for Sorensen that would be bigger, since it is a very small library and has very little room to expand any programs.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's a heavily used facility, isn't it?
Yes, all of our branches are very heavily used.
Okay. The Willa Cather on Center Street, what's the plan for the Willa Cather?
It needs to be replaced at some point. Some of the issues for Willa Cather are going to depend on, in terms of location, what happens where we build a central library. If the central library goes closer to 72nd, the question is, we are looking for a couple of years of data to indicate what traffic patterns it does affect Willa Cather, because at 40th and Center, that could change depending on where a central library is, and it could then have us looking further south to repurpose the library, to move the library branch, or to move it further west. The original consultant had suggested that we move it closer to Exarban.
I see. And the South Omaha Library, which I think is one of the newest in the system, isn't it? Is there any plan for a change on that?
No, there's no plan to change where the facility is. They've actually done some internal changes to improve traffic flows because of the use that they're getting.
Yeah, it's an excellent facility, and I've used it a lot. It's really good. So, well, this is exciting. What's the time frame for the relocation of the main library? What are you looking at in terms of time?
Well, that's the moving target of the time frame for that one, because that requires two libraries to be solved simultaneously. We would have to have a central library location, and we'd have to have a downtown library plan, and so that one's going to be more of a dance, I think, than a clear shot. The idea is the Southwest Library that we are shovel ready in 2020.
Okay.
So we only have a couple of years to get the Southwest branch in progress, and then depending on how this all plays out, there are a couple of scenarios that we are trying to look at. If we find a central library location and we start building, then we can move everything from the downtown library into central library, rent a smaller space as we demolish central library and rebuild. That would be one way, and then we'll see how it actually turns out, whether or not we have to vacate central library, downtown library, rent a smaller space and run a small library while we demolish and then build simultaneously. Those are the financing questions that I think will dictate how this all plays out in the next 5 to 10 years.
And that brings me to my final question. We make a contribution to the library with a separate mill levy dedicated to the library for users who live outside the city of Omaha. And I don't know off the top of my head what that annual contribution is. Maybe you do. But in addition to that, where is the financing? Is it Omaha General Fund, or is there a dedicated source of revenue?
So Southwest Library is going to be part of the bond issue that the city is planning to take to the voters this summer. So that is part of the facilities bond. We have $35 million of that is earmarked for 2 libraries, or hopefully they'll cover 2 libraries. And then we are in the middle of talking to philanthropy and working with organizations to see where we are going to reach. For example, what is it, 3.6 million to outfit a library once the building is built, to put actually books and computers and things that aren't capital improvement costs, to open the doors and have resources in it by the time the library opens. So we are going to have to look at what that looks like and do some fundraising with our partners at the foundation and at the Friends.
So that 35 million would get you the Southwest Library, and what else?
We hope that it will get us started on the downtown branch and start put aside money for what we're going to do downtown.
Thanks a lot, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Commissioner Kraft?
Yes. Quick question. Regarding the aggregate results on this handout you gave us, what was the question asked? Reading the first 2 pages, I don't see what the question people are agreeing or disagreeing with.
It was agreeing or disagreeing on the consultant's report for building a Southwest branch, for moving Willa Cather, rebuilding Elkhorn. It corresponds with the projects outlined in this report.
I wasn't certain since it wasn't spelled out, and I appreciate that. That's the only question I have. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the report. I'm always very interested in it. I was told by the head of the library when I was in the mayor's office that I was the only mayor that ever used the library. That's how we found the old city seal, incidentally, that we got installed. I'm looking at the report, and I have a real thing. I call the World Herald when I read their library column on Sunday, and they call the downtown library, they use the full name, W. Dale Clark, whose family, I think, bought the naming rights for $75,000 or something. And some of us downtown affectionately call it the Dick Clark Library. But anyway, the one I really watch closely is the Charles B. Washington Library. The reason being that when it's called Washington, people may think it's George, and it's not. I knew Charlie Washington real well, and the story of the naming is kind of fun because I broke all the rules doing it. I attended his service, and while I was speaking to the crowd, I realized how much Charlie meant to the community, so I announced that we were renaming the library after him. The place erupted. Well, then I called Eileen Worth, who was president of the library board, and I said, Eileen, you got to bail me out on this one. And she did, and the library board went along and renamed it. But what I watched closely is that the downtown library seems like, in most cases, as is the Willa Cather branch, they're called by their full name. But Swanson and some of the others, Abrams and Washington, are not. And I think it's really important that we include the first names. Charlie's last name was not really Washington. Charlie was originally, I believe, from Mississippi, and his family, I think, back a couple generations, inherited that name. So I think it's really important that when we refer to these branches, that we really truly respect the people after whom they're named. And I particularly am doggedly chasing the use of Charlie's name in front of Washington, because Washington by itself is meaningless. So it's not a criticism, but I do really like to ask you to be sensitized and call these branches by their first names as well. I think Milt Abrams was a great guy, and so I think you get the message. But I really particularly watch Charlie, and I think Charlie would appreciate that, because he was definitely one of the world's best hell raisers. So, but I appreciate this very much, and I'm excited about. Ann and I have used the library at 72nd and Dodge. Very confusing for us, but we went once and we really didn't get it, so we never really went back. We're too old to understand what was taking place there. So I needed my 9-year-old grandson or somebody to help me through that place. But I really wonder, are we, I'm really curious what the usage and what you're doing about the material in the library. I mean, I know a lot of people are still reading books, I do, and I wonder whether all these other changes in technology, or what's the effect on the library system, and if there is one, what are you doing to respond to it? I mean, are the new libraries going to have just books, or, I mean, they have other things too, but what are you looking into on the technology?
Well, as far as ebooks, in 2015, ebook circulation plateaued, and ebook sales actually plateaued. It's not going to replace print, not for a very long time. They're kind of being used in conjunction. There are some people who prefer things in an e-format, and some people who prefer them in a hardbound format. Even millennials, if they're given an e-textbook, odds are they'll buy the hardbound textbook so they can make notes in it. That's not as easy to do with electronic copies. We do need to be much better with our technology. We are in the process of moving off of cable modems at all of our branches and onto fiber, and upgrading our broadband from about 15 megs to 500 megs. This will really change services at the library and improve usage and access to resources for everybody.
Okay.
And that'll include our Wi-Fi as well.
I'm really glad that megs are being increased. I'm known as the computer expert here. I have if something goes wrong with the computer, I have a hammer down here that I pick up and come up and whack and fix it. But seriously, I do appreciate your coming here. I think this is the first time we've ever had the library come talk to us, and it's a discussion that we have occasionally, because we're very happy that the people who live outside the city limits have access to the library, and we like that relationship. That credit goes to Commissioner Duda years ago. He established and they're paying for it, established the ability of taxpayers outside of the corporate limits of the city to pay to use the library. That's really important, so I commend him for doing that so many years ago, and it's obviously a success has been proved. But do me a favor, remember Charlie's first name, and the others as well, Milt, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Happy to do so.
Commissioner Morgan.
Well, I appreciate you coming down and talking to us and giving us some of the information. So the bond issue of the $35 million, would that be just for the structures, acquiring the land and building the 2 facilities? And you would have some monies coming back because of the 90th Street facility being probably sold or offered for sale at some point.
At some point, we would probably see those dollars come back, but the intention is probably not to sell those until everything else is
Right.
built and things are shifted, because we're already going to be cramped for space.
How many square feet would replace, for example, the 90th Street Library? Have you got that yet?
So
or-
the new central library plan is about 140,000 square feet. Is
Okay,
intention, is what we anticipate it would need. One of the issues that has come from the consultants is there is a square foot per capita best practices for libraries. 0.75 is the national gold standard, .50 is West Virginia's standard, and we are precariously close at .59 to .61 right now in square footage per capita. And so it is our belief that we've got to look at that very carefully as we go forward. We find that our meeting spaces are one of the most frequently used parts of our library, which is very different from what normal library practices may be. But you know, in some of our libraries, we used to have 6-month waiting lists to get into our meeting spaces because community groups don't have a lot of free space available to them. And so they utilize ours, a lot of nonprofits and a lot of small groups, quilting groups, you know, those kinds of organizations and groups. So we found that we've got this large necessity. So part of the problem with the W. Dale Clark Library is that the downtown library, because of the big center cone atrium, carries sound, and there's no ability to gain that square footage for and privacy. We hear a lot of complaints that students have a hard time studying because the sound carries throughout the library. So those are some of those issues of infrastructure that we can't necessarily fix. We also have 2 aging elevators in the downtown library that I believe last summer they patchworked it to keep it running during the summer months, but we are told if we have to do a rehab, it's $2 million per shaft. And obviously we have some ADA compliance if we don't keep those elevators moving. So we have a number of infrastructure issues. You know, it's where the rubber hits the road of whether or not, you know, we spend $4 million in that building and it's still not working the way we want it to work.
So what would be the size of a Midtown library, approximately, square footage wise?
It would be 140,000.
So, you know, don't answer, but I know that Kiewit's moving downtown, their current buildings in Midtown. You know, thinking it has somewhere around that square footage with a lot of parking. That could be an interesting situation. You've got a couple buildings there that are very large, the Blackstone and so on. So it's just something to think about as you go through that process. And I don't know how you're going through the process, but that should be something to look at. I haven't heard what may or may not happen down the road in several years. And I'm certain that building has been well maintained without deferred maintenance and plenty of parking, and it is centrally located. It's interesting because you hear citizens talking about, you know, with the computers and technology, as Mayor Boyle knows because he's really the tech person of this board. You know, you hear people talking that the libraries, they're not being used like they are, but what you're telling us, you're having way more visitors to the library than you used to have 10 years ago.
We have over 1 million visitors a year easily. Last year it was over 1.5 million.
Wow.
We circulated over 3 million items. Our databases are used heavily. People download ebooks and audiobooks frequently. Our resources are available whether you come into a branch or you just use things online. And we're doing our best to make things more accessible to everyone. And we're working on a lot of projects that would expand access into the schools as well.
That's really great. All right, I think that's all. I think you should come back at some point as you decide to go forward with the bond issue. And, you know, I think we want to look at being supportive of that would be my thought, and listen to future plans as you know, develop further. Do you charge when groups are meeting there?
No, we don't charge for any of our resources.
So you allow a group, if it's, you know, the American Cancer Society having a meeting or something at your facility, or Doug Kagan, I know, meets at your one out in Millard, you allow that as long as they make a reservation? And
Yes, actually, meeting room uses has become so popular, we've moved to an online reservation system to manage it. And people can log in online and book up to 90 days worth of meetings, and they can book again on a rolling 90-day cycle. And we did that to make it more accessible to more people, so that more people could take advantage of the free meeting space. But it's incredibly popular here.
do you ever think about that, you ought to be charging somewhat because you do replace carpet the more visitors you have and so on?
We're a public resource. We want to be available to the public at no cost.
That's great. Well, I thank you, and Carol, appreciate that you give your time. I'm certain the pay is good for what you do. And we appreciate that you're there working hard at this as a volunteer.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's really, really a heartfelt thing. I love our library system, and I want it to be the best it can and serve our citizens well.
Well, good luck.
Thanks.
Commissioner Kraft, then Commissioner Borgeson, then Commissioner Boyle, then Commissioner Duda.
Yes. I've always been a very strong supporter of the library. When I was on the Omaha City Council, I fought to keep them open as many hours as we could when the mayor was trying to shut them down 1 and 2 days a week. Not either of these two former mayors. I view the library as a great equalizer. It doesn't care if it takes you a long time to read or a short time. It doesn't care if you're intelligent to begin with, but you have the ability to become more intelligent. It doesn't care if you're rich or poor, white or black, green or orange. It just doesn't care because it doesn't know. It is truly part of the democratic system of being a great equalizer. Carol, you and I met and we had a great discussion about the future plans, and I'm pleased to see him coming. When I viewed the downtown, I used to be a big user of the downtown library, and I was a big user of the library when it was on 19th Street and Harney, because I'd walk there every day after school. It was my sanctuary. The downtown library, whenever I walked in there, I saw it as a great waste of space. Those open atriums, yeah, I never figured out why they thought that was necessary. And the stone on the outside that looks like poured concrete, I understand is not, and it was a very expensive limestone substance or something like that costs a lot of money, but just looks like concrete. So, use the money wisely. I'm sure you will. And thank you.
Commissioner Borgeson.
Thank you for coming and showing us your plans. The Southwest branch that is currently there, that will stay when the new one is built, or
This is an additional library, so
one?
we go to a 13-branch system.
So then if you go to that new Southwest branch, which is going to be picking up some of the folks farther west than that and into the Elkhorn area, does the Elkhorn one stay too?
The Elkhorn stays where it is. In fact, Elkhorn is too small currently, but because it's still fairly newer, we had to push off the idea of rebuilding a new branch on its site for a few more years.
And so for the 10,000-pound gorilla in the room, what's the real purpose of presenting to us today?
Well, I think it's important. I think we don't have a strong dialogue with the county, and you guys obviously are part of our library system. We have talked for a while since Laura came on board about the importance of having that open communication, and as we go forward, we wanted to make sure that you guys knew that we were here and what we were doing, because I think we're trying to do some big picture thinking about a system that affects the county overall and as well as the city. I know that there is a good chance, depending on how this all plays out and where land acquisition goes, that there is a good chance we will build the next library, the next Southwest branch in the county and not in the city. Some of those logistics are going to happen. And given that, it seems a very fitting time that we should make sure that you are apprised of what our intentions of and where we want to proceed.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boyle.
Yes, in listening to some of the conversation, it occurred to me that maybe you're aware of this program, and I'll ask before I make my statement. Do you have any programs to give books to children? Could you talk about that if you do?
There is a Baby Reads program that is currently in a pilot study that is being done, and the only reason I know that is because of my day job hat is with the Medical Society, and so the library and the foundation partnered with our physicians, and so our physicians there's a book packet that goes to pediatricians' offices and doctors' offices, and they give them at the 6-month wellness check and encourage their parents to read to their children. Inside, the library has provided books either in English or Spanish, as well as a application to get a library card for the baby. And when they go and do that, they also get another baby book.
There was a program that I read about, and then later on it turned out it was on television as well, 60 Minutes or something. But there was a barber in a poor area of New York who started a program of giving the children books when they came into the barber shop. And if you think about it, I mean, everybody at one time, at least I think almost all the population, goes to either a beauty shop or a barber shop of some sort at some time, several times during the year. So it was a terrific place to distribute books to children. And they also had a section for adults. And so I wonder whether we could, I'd love to see you investigate, since you're in charge of books in our community, to investigate the possibility of establishing a relationship with beauty shops and barber shops, and then soliciting the public to donate books. I think I would be surprised if it wasn't a terrifically successful program and a really terrific way to advance literacy. So I'd like to ask you to kind of, if you would, to please look into that among your other responsibilities. And for my 2 cents, we live downtown, and I do use the W. Dale Clark Library, but I do think its time has come and gone, and I think the maintenance on it, particularly as you mentioned the elevators, is really over the top. So it probably makes sense for that building to be demolished, and the site probably offered at a very low cost to a corporation to develop a nice headquarters there right at the head of the, or the foot, which depending on your description of the Jean Leahy Mall. It is really a prime spot for that, and it would be something that I think it'd be terrific if the mayor and along with the library board considered that. I think that would be the thing to do, and to relocate it someplace that's not quite so prime, you know. It's one of those things, but that's my 2 cents. And let me know how that barbershop library goes. Okay? But thank you very much, and others have said it, but thank you very much for your service and for your leadership. And we've met, and we were invited to the fireworks, and we went down there one year and had a great time. And then you postponed the last one, but anyway, that's right. Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you.
Commissioner Duda.
Thank you. Before I comment on the library, I want to follow up real quickly. A program that my wife is involved with in North Omaha called Trinity Reads, where Trinity Lutheran Church at 30th and Reddick, they go out to a number of North Omaha schools, OPS schools, and a volunteer reads to the students and then they do this once a month, and they give every student a copy of the book that they just read. And it's a chance for these students to begin building a book collection of their own, and it's an amazingly successful program. It's really taken off and well funded, a lot of good support for it. It has been a long time since we have heard from the Omaha Library, and in part this is because everything seems to be going so well. When we wrote the library agreement 20-some years ago, we created a committee of people primarily from outside of Omaha, but some from inside of Omaha, to handle any problems we had with service for residents from outside the cities. The committee never met, never had to meet. I got calls from a few people on the committee saying, "You asked me to be on this committee, are we ever going to meet?" I said, "Only if problems come up," and they never have. You've given wonderful service to the whole county. We've never felt outside of the city like we were being treated like second-class citizens or anything, that we are full and welcome members to participate in the library, and we certainly appreciate that. I've heard a little rumor that there may be at some point a conversation about changing the funding formula, and there would be a little bit of resistance to that, I think. But we'll welcome any conversation, certainly. it's you know you're talking to a bunch of old people when we sit here saying, well, we named this library after this guy and we want you to respect it, and we really are old, and we wrote the library agreement. I mean, there's a lot of history sitting up here at this point. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but anyhow, keep up the good work. I appreciate how well you have worked for the entire county. Your library. I do believe that. You've given great service. And of course, the funding formula, a little bit of the money does go. I mean, the money that we outside the city pay, the tax that is collected on us, a little bit of it does go to Bennington, Valley, Waterloo, all of the libraries. Omaha gets over 90% of it. You get the lion's share, but a little bit. I mean, for a farmer that lives out west of Valley, they may not ever come down and use the Omaha Library. They're more likely to use Valley or Bennington or something like that. So some of the funding does certainly have to be included with the smaller towns that have provided the service. I'm very pleased with how the library agreement has worked through the years, how the service has been, and I thank you for what you're doing, and again would say keep up the good work.
Commissioner Morgan.
I just want to mention, lastly, you're going to be looking at real estate, and if I can, for certain, be helpful to you, and that's your decision, and my feelings aren't hurt if I can't be, I'd want you to know that I would do that voluntarily, and there'd be no charge to you no matter what we were doing, and I personally would be involved, and maybe some of my people at the office to at least give you options or looking at information to give you an opinion about that. We're asked to do that often, and we do consulting nationally and have done it internationally at a fee, but we would do that with the library without any charge whatsoever to help you as you look at your options. So if that can be helpful, call, and if not, that's okay. But I'd be glad to look at that because you're going to be doing some substantial investigation as you move forward. So glad to help you with that if I can.
Thank you.
Commissioner Crowe.
Yes, thoughts came in listening to the other commissioners talk. With the repopulation of downtown, have you seen usage of the downtown branch going up?
Usage has been going up slightly in downtown, largely because we've tried to improve services for the people who use that facility, adding things that will help them more.
And I know that downtown parking has always been an issue. In your redevelopment plan, are you taking parking into consideration downtown?
As much as we can at this point.
Because for using the library, my opinion is to keep it as an equalizer, parking should be available and it should be free. Right now, it's not free there. But it's very hard to police with the usage of downtown. If you provide free parking, everybody's going to want to poach. Then the next question is, my son works for New Style Development, and I've been in a number of the new downtown apartment complexes. And I am astounded at the number of bicycles I see. Do you have adequate bicycle parking?
We do have bicycle parking. We also have the bicycles that you can borrow and ride around town. There's a stall of those in front of the main library.
But do you have adequate bicycle parking for those who are not using?
I'd have to check to see if it's adequate for everybody. I believe it has been. I haven't heard that we need anything additional.
Because one of the units, if I remember right, had 213 apartments or something, and I could swear I saw 30 bicycles there. And that was just what was inside at the time. I don't know how many were out where people ride to work, etc. But yeah, I'm amazed, literally amazed, how many bicycles I see downtown in these apartment buildings, even though I don't see them on the streets.
Okay, let me say, Ms. Marlene, nice to meet you. The last library director that I actually met and talked to was Rivka Sass, and that's when I worked in the mayor's office. So, personally, I thought she was a great library director. I hate to see her leave. I don't because it's not in our terrain, I don't keep up as much as I have, but I have in other places saw things that have attracted me about the library system and its potential. So I guess one of my requests is, I would request that if you could put it on your calendar to do an annual presentation, because I do think there's a lot of collaborative efforts that could potentially happen. And in your conversation or in your mention about the county and to Commissioner Borgerson's question, you know, there's a part of me personally that's attracted by a county-wide library system. It probably could get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how that arrangement happens, but I think it's something there that could possibly be attractive as we get bigger and have to get to a certain place. But I say that because, too, you know, there's possibly, we were in Washington, D.C., and there was this concept brought up that I think is a potential, not only in the youth detention center, but also outside. There's a group of us, Mark Snow from OPS, Commissioner Borges, and myself, and Councilman Gray. They're going to meet to kind of talk about a concept that actually was a surprise to me called Freedom Schools from the Marion Wright Edelman and the Children's Defense Fund and how they've been used. So hopefully once we have this conversation, I think there's some partnership there with you all, and kind of look forward to that. But in some of the questions, I want to ask the director, because you've kind of put to rest some things I thought when this big ebook thing started coming. Can you give me your kind of quick state of public libraries? Because I kind of was in this mindset, like, is the footprint too big because of ebooks? And by the conversation, it seems like there's a more relevant, robust purpose than what it is, and that's why I kind of asked for a kind of new yearly presentation, because I see these things and they trigger thoughts when I'm in other places, but the library is not really under our control to do some things. But I just want to be on guard when I hear these things and see what the possibility is about future partnerships. So if you can give me your kind of thought on where the state of public library is today and probably your vision, I'd like to just kind of keep that in my head to look out for.
Library spaces today need to be more flexible and open, because there's a lot of programming that goes on, and largely people want to use our space for meetings. So meeting room space is really a priority. And the balance between electronic resources and print materials is just, it's still a thing. Ebooks came out almost 30 years ago. I remember reading about them in 1985, and it was always talked about as supplanting print, and it hasn't, and I don't see that happening anytime soon. So keeping that balance between print books and ebooks is important. Also, people learn better reading it. Having a hard copy, you retain more than you do if you just read on a screen. And that's not changing yet. Even millennials find that to be the case. It's easier to retain it if you're reading it in print. We are really beefing up electronic resources and our infrastructure for technology. In 2016, the internet was accessed more on mobile devices than on actual PCs. So being flexible with our mobile devices is important as well. We circulate Chromebooks that have a built-in Wi-Fi connection. So if somebody checks out a Chromebook, it already has internet built in. It's like a hotspot, and they can take it home and do things with it, more so than just checking out a hotspot or a device without internet. We still have a significant number of people who don't have internet at home. So trying to meet that need is important. And with our current state of technology, we're not quite there yet to do it. But once we are fully upgraded, which should be by July, we'll have the infrastructure to do a lot of other interesting things. There's TV white space technology that broadcasts on the UHF bands, and it broadcasts a Wi-Fi signal that can travel up to 6 miles. Those are things that are possible. An antenna on Washington, on the Charles B. Washington branch, could broadcast a free open Wi-Fi signal for anybody in the community to log on and use. And that's another area that technology is moving into. And with the broadening of the 5G infrastructure, that's also opening up a lot of other pathways for getting technology to people who don't have it right now.
Okay. I look forward to seeing you all, and again, please engage us. There's opportunities, I think.
We will, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Got one more, Commissioner Campbell.
I'm interested in what you're just saying there, and not to get too involved in library science. I had a tough time mastering the Dewey Decimal System when I was in school, so I'm no expert. But if you do take the W. Dale Clark elsewhere, the central library elsewhere, that means centralized sorting would go someplace. And what are your plans for that?
The book distribution throughout the system, is
Yeah.
that what you're referring to? Well, right now we are moving, we are incorporating our RFID technology in our branches. We're currently tagging all of our materials with radio frequency ID tags, and those broadcast a radio signal. So when you go to check out a book, instead of having to scan a barcode, and you know how hard that can be if you've done that at the market, each book broadcasts the signal, and you put it down on the pad, and it just picks up all the signals and checks out an entire stack of books right away. Sorting equipment would be incorporated into every new build that we do, and there are other things like book return drop boxes that are hooked into the system, and when you put your book in the drop box, it checks it in automatically. It doesn't have to get into the library to be checked in by someone. The box checks everything in. So then it moves into the library and it can be sorted. And these things would save a lot of staff time and give staff the freedom to do other things.
So you have these in the system now?
We're implementing the basic system, and we're tagging our items. We have a company that's come in and excuse me, they're ahead of schedule with tagging. We have over 770,000 items that need to be handled and tagged. Excuse me. And that process will be done by April 4th. Then we will start installing the new security gates that will pick up that signal and will replace the magnetic strip gates. And this will just shave about 30 seconds off of every circulation transaction, but given that we've circulated over 3 million items, every transaction counts. So that will save a lot of time for staff. And inventorying the collection will be a lot easier. You don't have to remove the book from the shelf. You can do it with a handheld device, just reading the signals.
That's great, thanks.
Okay. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
We will go now to committees and discussions. Item 7, item A under committees is finance, and item 1 is the budget report. Commissioners Morgan and Boyle.
As presented, basically.
Correct. Thank you. Item G is the Human Resources Committee. Item 1 is the weekly personnel report from Civil Service as received. Item 2 is legislative issues, and there are no legislative issues at this time. With that, we do have a need for executive session for real estate and litigation. Nothing else, right? Okay. Is there a motion to go into executive session? Motion by Commissioner Boyle.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Morgan. Please vote.
Mr. Chair, I want to make a comment for a meeting coming up, committee meeting, when we get through.
Sure.
I just want to remind everyone that we have a meeting on the 22nd. That's 2 days from now, and it should be, I guess, the first in a series of a few, because we're going to be talking about what happened in Santa Barbara when the floods and the fire and all hell broke loose. For some reason, and I do have a friend who works in that department, and spoken to him, and what happened at the beginning was that they did not make mandatory evacuation a part of their plan, and it failed. And so they had a lot of things that cascaded from there, and some very literally cascaded. But in any event, we're going to have a report from our people to talk about what we're prepared to do and what our emergency warning system is and our policies. So it could be the first of several meetings to try to get a handle on what we're doing with our sirens and who's paying for them and whether they're effective and all that sort of thing, and what other communities are doing to notify people, citizens of disaster. So it should be an interesting meeting, and I hope that you'll be able to attend. If not, we have a very excellent person who takes our minutes, and she'll be there. Thank you.
Okay, with that, please vote.
Motion passes, all present voting yes.
And again, we're going to executive session for the reasons of real estate and litigation.
You're a yes as well? That's perfect. I got it. All right. Motion passes.